Welcome back. In the last devlog, I kept almost everything about this game a secret. In this one, I'm doing the opposite. Every card on the table, including how the story ends. So fair warning, there are spoilers ahead. Quick version if you're new, I'm Ubisoft and I'm building Kobold Garden, a Chao Garden styled kobold raising game completely solo. And yeah, it's been a while since the last devlog. I'll get to the reason for that later in the video. The biggest thing you asked for last time was to stop being vague and actually show the plan. And you're right. It's a devlog and building this out in the open with you is the whole point. So here's the deal. By 1.0, you'll be able to raise a kobold all the way up into a dragon, wings and everything, in a world that's convinced dragons don't exist anymore. There's even a second campaign where you play as the one trying to stop it. That's where we're headed, but before any of that, here's what actually got built since the last devlog. Before the big design reveals, here's the foundation everything sits on, the kobold model itself. Back in the last few streams, we were retopologizing the main kobold. When I export the sculpt out of ZBrush, I make a high poly and low poly version. And that low poly version is usually close to the final topology already. But the spots around the joints, like the elbows and knees, need cleaner geometry so they bend right when animated. So I use a blender tool called retopoflow to draw new polygons right on top of the low poly mesh, fixing those areas and any other mesh errors without remodeling from scratch. Once the retopo's done, I rig it, basically give the mesh a skeleton so it can be animated. I've made enough rigs by now that I usually just build these from scratch. For Unity, there's two rig types that matter, humanoid and non-humanoid. Anything with more bones than a human skeleton counts as non-humanoid, so even though the kobold looks basically human-shaped, those extra leg bones make it non-humanoid. Humanoid is usually the safer pick since you can reuse any humanoid animations with it, but I'm animating everything myself so I don't strictly need that. I also added IK or inverse kinematics, which lets you move a whole chain of bones from just a single one. Great for arms and legs, not so great for a long tail though since tails need finer control. So I'm trying something new to me. Blender can turn a bone chain into what's called bendy bones, which gives you a chain control but with way more natural movement. The catch is bendy bones are Blender only. Export them into Unity and those bones just don't move because Unity has no idea of what a bendy bone is. So my workaround is a proxy tail that follows the bendy bones in Blender, and I bake the proxy's position when animating. I get the best of both worlds, bendy bone movement that actually survives out of Blender. Then textures. I use Substance Painter to bake detail from that high poly ZBrush sculpt onto the low poly mesh. That's a trick to making a model look incredibly detailed without millions of polygons. I'm still newish to texturing in Substance Painter, but I figured out enough normal and material work to paint the kobold scales straight onto the texture instead of modeling them as separate geometry. That keeps the model light, and it means I can customize the kobold scales through textures alone, which is going to matter a lot when customizing kobolds down the line. And that's the finished kobold model. I'm happy with how it turned out. The next streams were onto the baby kobold, which should go a lot faster since it's smaller. I'm picturing something close to the baby Pokemon Toxel, but with that kobold flair. The same energy as a baby Chao, but more modern look. But here's the actual plan. Kobold Garden's whole goal is to be as close to the Chao Garden games as possible mechanically, but Chao Garden was built to loop with the Sonic games. Kobold Garden doesn't have Sonic to lean on, so it has to stand on its own. That means some deliberate deviations. So here's what I'm considering to change. A Chao's life cycle usually looks like this. Hatch from an egg, then into an adult Chao, into reincarnation or a Chaos Chao. Kobolds follow the same idea, but with an extra form in the middle. Egg, baby kobold, kobold, adult kobold, then reincarnation or into a dragon. That extra form isn't just for show. It fixes something I think actually is a problem with how Chao evolutions work. In Chao Garden, a Chao's alignment and stats decide how it looks, and when it evolves into its adult form, that look locks in. High dark alignment? You get a dark adult Chao, and you're stuck with it unless you reincarnate. It's a one and done and that's it. The extra kobold form turns that one decision into a sequence. The first evolution, baby to kobold locks only that stat type. So a kobold with a high swim stat becomes a swim kobold. The next evolution, kobold to adult, locks the alignment, normal, hero, or dark. So if the swim kobold leans dark when it evolves, it's now a dark swim kobold, locked in. Here's why I like this pacing. It gives you a sort of redemption window. Treat your kobold badly early, you can still course correct before the adult lock. Or maybe you were going for a dark swim kobold, but once you hit that middle form, you realize the dark look doesn't really suit it. You can change the course before it sets. Each form gets a job. Baby commits the type, the middle commits the morality, and the adult commits the fate. The first two decide what your kobold is. The adult evolution decides where it ends up, which is what I mean by fate. Which brings us back to the dragon in the room. Chao have that rare, hard-to-reach Chaos Chao form. For kobolds, that's the dragon. A normal kobold is about knee height, an adult is full height, and a dragon is about 2 to 3 times your size. And because this is a standalone game with an actual story, dragons aren't just an endgame trophy, they're woven into the plot. In a world where everyone believes dragons are a myth that died out, raising your own might be how you prove them wrong. But more on the story in a bit. As much as people love Chao Garden, it does have its flaws, and the big one for me is retention. A lot of people try it out, poke around for a few minutes, and run out of things to do, and just leave. And usually never come back. So Kobold Garden still has 3 gardens, a dense jungle with tall trees, a dark cave full of gems, and a floating island with half-buried marble ruins. All about the size of Chao Gardens. But behind each one is something much bigger, the wilderness. Each wilderness has their own biomes, their own resources to gather, and big wild animals guarding them. Pull resources out and you can craft items and weapons for yourself and your kobolds. And to close the gameplay loop, in the middle of the lobby is where you can drop into the dungeons, a roguelite dungeon crawler. Go down the floors, grab randomized loot, and reach the bottom or die trying. The point of this is where you get the gem shards, the chaos drive equivalent, which is how your kobolds reach higher stat levels. I've mentioned this before, but the Chao Kindergarten is getting replaced with a shady bar. Every table has its own cast of characters looking for party members for their own quests. So you can drop off a kobold with them, come back a few days later, and find it sitting at the table playing poker with them, toothpick in its mouth. Quests can earn kobolds new skills, some purely cosmetic, like playing different instruments, some actual combat skills that help you out in battle. The bar is also where you'll find the fortune teller to rename kobolds, the doctor to check out their stats, and the black market in the back selling items, and sometimes even rare kobold eggs. And a quick one on modding. I want this game to be moddable, I'm just not sure how far that goes. There's a Unity option called IL2CPP. That makes games run maybe 5 to 10% faster, but it basically locks modders out. So I'm skipping this and trying to keep the important stuff accessible in code. On top of that, I'll be streaming the whole thing on Twitch so the code's out in the open, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay, now for the story. It opens up with you riding back from a quest with a group of other knights, holding a massive gem in a horse-drawn cart. Your king sent you on it and you're bringing the gem back to present to him. He's impressed and he orders you to take it up to the head mage's tower for study. You strap it into the tower's elevator and you ride up with it, but partway the gem slips loose, sending electricity throughout the tower and teleporting the whole thing with you in it, somewhere else entirely. You wake up to find the head mage frantically trying to keep the place from falling apart, and the two of you realize the only way to get home is to get resources you don't have. So you need to head out into neighboring lands, and that's where you find the very first Kobold Gardens. You wake up to find the head mage frantically trying to keep the place from falling apart, and the two of you realize to get home you need resources you don't have here. So you head out into the neighboring lands and find the very first Kobold Garden. In the Dark story, you play as the Dark Knight, your rival, fiercely loyal to the king and convinced that befriending these lizard-like creatures is straight up heresy. When you teleport off with the tower, the king sends him off to find out what happened, using the leftover mages and gems to jump him to and from your location. And along the way, he learns out what the king actually wants the gems for, which forces a choice. Are you with the king or against him? You end up doing both eventually, which is what unlocks the endgame storyline. The knight versus the king, an army against a kobold horde, and with your new allies, maybe a pretty big fire-breathing trick up your sleeve. With the story out of the way, some of you may have noticed a gap in my streaming schedule. I thought I had a full month free to stream every day. Then a seasonal job I lined up for the month after started a month early. And suddenly, I was working almost every other day. 8-hour shift plus 2 hours of commuting each way. Brutal, but I carpool so it's survivable, but it's flat out killed my streaming schedule. Basically, I lost control of my life for a bit and I couldn't stream. It's slowed down now, so I'm getting back into it in July, but we should be back to real progress soon. And yeah, a lot of this is ambitious, because it basically is. Given my track record, I know how it looks, and a lot of this still needs time, which is why I'm seriously considering a Kickstarter down the line. Not until there's a demo, but it could free me up to work on Kobold full-time without sweating next month's bills. I'll see where I'm at as the demo gets closer. So that's where things are standing. Next video we're getting into the rest of the Kobold line, starting off with the baby kobold. As always, tell me what you think. I read all of it. The Discord link's in the description if you want to follow along between videos. And if you haven't wishlisted Kobold Garden on Steam yet, now's a great time. You can also support development on Patreon. My OBS keeps crashing and I cannot afford RAM in this economy. But before you go, if you haven't seen where this whole thing started, check out the first Kobold Garden devlog. It's the one where I go into why I scrapped the old version and started over, and it'll make everything I just showed you hit harder. It should be on screen right now. Go watch that one and I'll see you in the next one.